Hi everyone, welcome back to another week on the Brush by Brandy YouTube channel. This week we are working on this piece behind me and I hope this pop of color gets you kind of excited to see how we got here. So this piece was a custom order and it started out as a regular pretty plain dresser, and my customer found a color that she liked, so we started with our base of greens, and then she had an inspiration piece which was a chair from her grandmother that she wanted to tie in with some shades of red, and so we did just that. I'm going to be using a paint this week from Pureco, which is a beautiful paint to blend. It dried to this beautiful soft buttery finish. I really enjoyed using it, and then this poppies transfer from Redesign with Prima was just the right pop of color. I love it against the green background. But you guys, let's go ahead and take this one from start to finish. Stick around, let's get started. Here's where I started on my piece. This one's been in my inventory for quite some time, but someone finally eyed it for a custom order. These are a couple of the inspiration pictures that my customer sent to me. It's the exact bed that she ordered and then the shade of red that she wants to incorporate. We're definitely going to tie these in on this piece. She also liked the sage green nightstands that were next to the bed. I wanted to show you a side-by-side comparison of the Surf Prep 3x4 electric ray and the Surf Prep 5-inch random orbital. These are my two sanders, and what I ended up doing is I just invested in two hoses, so that when I want to swap my sanders, all I have to do is come over here to my vacuum. I can pull the hose out of the port and I can swap it for the other sander, and I can hook either one of these into my vacuum. So right now I'm going to unhook the vacuum from my 3x4 and I'm going to hook it up to my 5-inch random orbital. All right, and now that I've got them hooked up to the vacuum, the one that I want to use, I wanted to show you guys what the difference is. Now my 3x4 is a smaller pad on it. They all both have the same interchangeable abrasives I can use with either one. I like this because it's a little bit smaller, it's more nimble. I can use this for stripping a top like this, or I could use it for distressing a front. It gets into smaller places. But when I want muscle and I just purely want to strip wood like what I'm doing right here, the 5-inch random orbital is perfect for that. So I'm going to show you the difference. Both of these have an 80 grit paper on them. An 80 grit film from Surf Prep on both of them. They're both new, and I'm going to show you what the difference is so you can see how quickly these will strip. I'm going to use them side by side. Okay, so you can kind of see right there how quickly that 5-inch random orbital will strip a top. And that's exactly what I wanted to have the two different vacuum hoses for, so that when I want to strip a top, I can throw in that hose, plug in the 5-inch orbital, and I can strip this top in a matter of minutes. So let's go ahead. I'm going to put my mask on, put my vacuum on, and let's go ahead and get this top down to bare wood. 5-inch random orbital knocked out this top in about 15 minutes, which is pretty fast. It probably would have taken me, I don't know, about 10 minutes longer using the 3x4. So the 3x4 does absolutely get the job done. It will strip a top, no problem. It will just take a little bit longer. Now for my finish sanding on this, I will still regard my 3x4 as my finish sander. So I'm going to put a 120 grit paper on this, and I'm going to go back over the top of it. So I don't consider this to be a finish sander. It's more of the muscle. The other thing you want to be careful of is, because it is so powerful, if you're doing a paper thin veneer, it will cut through it in no time flat. So you just want to be hyper aware if you're using the more powerful sander. that it will cut through those veneers, and sometimes you may not even notice it. So just sand cautiously if you're using the more powerful machine. I'm going to go ahead and throw the lighter grit paper on here. I usually do my 80 grit, which I did. I'm going to go to a 120 and then a 220 grit, and this will be super soft and ready for a new coat of stain. All right, I've gone ahead and cleaned the entire body of my piece. I stripped this top down using my Surf Prep sander. I removed all that hardware. That's going to go off to be cleaned. But now I want to go ahead and protect this using a coat of stain blocking primer. I'm choosing a stain blocking primer in a gray, and that's because it's going to be the closest to the colors that I plan to use on the body of this, which are some neutrals and greens. And I'm going to go ahead and brush this over the top. I'm not super worried about this one being a bleeder. The age of it might bleed a little bit, but I'm also using dark colors. So this is more of a preventative measure. I always like to prime pieces when I'm sending them off to a customer to make sure those finishes are as good a quality as I can give them. Here's where I landed with 2 coats of my light gray primer on the entire body of my piece and the top all stripped down to the raw wood. This is the color scheme that my customer had approved. We're using Pureco Paint this week, which is a clay-based paint. I went ahead and got a base coat laid onto my piece just so I could get a feel for how the paint moved and how it worked. I really like how this one blended, so let's go ahead and put a second coat on the piece. So one thing I want to point out right up front when blending with this paint is because it's a clay-based paint, it does lose some of its color as it dries. It's going to dry to a more white color, and the shade of the colors mutes out a little bit. But once you seal the paint, it all comes back. So it threw me off a little bit when I was trying to blend that my paint was changing colors at the same time. And that just meant that I needed to work in smaller areas and work them a little bit quicker before the paint dried. So it took a little bit of getting used to, but once I did, the paint blended incredibly well. It's absolutely beautiful, and it dries to this really luxurious, almost velvety finish. I'm using their chalk style paint. Pureco also has an all-in-one style paint, and that's not the one I'm using today, but after this, I can't wait to give that one a try as well. They do have a beautiful color selection. Their colors, at least the ones that I have, are all really muted shades, which were perfect for this look, and they really suit my aesthetic. I tend towards the muted shades as well. I'm using 4 shades of greens and beiges on this piece. I started at my bottom with my darkest color, which is called Myrtle. It lightens up into a color called Willow, and then a little bit of Calico, which is a creamy off-white, and some Chino, which is a nice beige color. Pureco is an Australian paint brand, but they do ship to the United States as well, which is really exciting. I'm going to drop a link to them in the description for this video. I didn't want a pure ombre on this blend, so even though it starts at a darker shade down at the bottom, it's a little bit random with I've got my darker shade kind of weaving up into the lighter shades in the middle of the piece, and I hope that it kind of accentuates the body of this piece and brings out the shape. This is more of a free-flowing blend, and so I just worked my way from one side to the other of my piece and working one blend at a time. I am using my Klingon S50 brush to brush my paint colors on, and then I'm using the premium brush from Wiseowl, their 1.5 inch round, to blend them together. I used a little bit of water on this one just because this is my second coat, but I found that it was a really easy blend to do. So these colors are nice and similar, and that always helps. I always tell you guys that the closer in tone that your colors are, the easier they're going to be to blend, and that really helped. The paint helped as well. It just was a really nice paint to blend with. And then by just working one small drawer section at a time, I was able to kind of not have to deal with the color changing when the paint dries, because I was already done with the drawer by the time that it started to dry, and I was able to move across the piece. So that's my biggest recommendation, is just to keep it in smaller sections with this paint. As I finished up my second coat across the entire body of my piece, I'm now ready to go ahead and decide on my transfer. But my customer was a little unsure whether she wanted to throw some red in there. She also was kind of leaning towards a little bit of script. So I pulled out a bunch of my transfers and I showed her several different options that could work on this color background. I, of course, had a few favorites, but here they all are. What do you guys think? Do you have a favorite in the bunch? I really think any of these could work, but she had a definite idea in her mind, so I'll show you what that is in just a little bit. In the meantime, let's go ahead and take care of this raw wood top. So I've already stripped this one back to the raw wood. I did put a water-based pre-stain conditioner on the top from Minwax, and that's just going to help my top accept the stain a little more evenly. What I'm using is the water-based glaze and stain from Pureco, and this color is called driftwood. It's kind of hard to tell in this light here, but once the pre-stain conditioner dries, this is going to add a kind of a gray whitewashed finish to the top. I did go ahead and do 2 coats of this to get the color that I wanted. All I'm doing is wiping on with a stain pad my glaze and stain across the top of my piece, working from one side to the next, making sure I work in small sections. Here's better light, the color that dried to once I had 2 coats on. I'm sure you guys have already figured it out, but the Poppy Gardens transfer from Redesign with Prima won on this one. My customer had a definite image of the color of red that she wanted for that pop of color on this piece to tie in with her room. So I went ahead and cut out all the individual red poppies and isolated them from this transfer, and then I laid them out in a random swag going from the bottom to the top of the piece so they looked really organic. This piece has a lot of molded details, so I just made sure I laid out the poppies kind of randomly so all the different shades of red intermingled with each other. I overlapped them in places, and then I just worked them one curve at a time so that they took to the curves without tearing. It's not uncommon when you're applying transfers to very detailed pieces like this that you may have some places that you need to touch up. So I just came back with a little bit of red or black paint and I was able to touch up in the poppies, and you can't even tell that there's any imperfections. Next, I'm coming around with a little bit of black wax and I'm just writing it into the crevices of each of my drawers. I'm just going to add a little bit of shading with the wax. This is going to emphasize some of these details on the piece. I am doing this on my raw paint, but if you're at all uncomfortable working with waxes, then you can seal your paint in a clear coat and then apply this wax over the top of it. I also added a little bit of gold gilding wax around the edges of some of my drawers. My hardware has been cleaned and I put that back on. It is staging day. I love photograph day. So this piece I chose to bring in these pops of red with a little bit of artwork with some red in it. I've got my red flowers and then my red artwork up above. So I've got 1, 2, 3 groupings of the red. I've got different heights in my staging, 1, 2, and 3 for some interest. I chose to keep it pretty simple. I'm actually craving the simplicity lately and more focus on the furniture and less on the staging. So a little bit of gold frames to tie in with my gold hardware. All my metals match, and this one is ready to go. I did spray this piece in 2 coats of satin clear coat, also from Pureco, when it was all done. That sealed everything all up nicely. You can see that hardware is back on. That's my original vintage hardware, just cleaned. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. You can find links for everything I used in the description for this post. And as always, you can find more Brushed by Brandy on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube, and on my website at brushedbybrandy.com. Don't forget to click that subscribe button.